Ladies and gentlemen, today on this wonderful Writing Celebration Friday, I want to teach you about a concept in math called absolute value. Brand new thing. Today I want to teach you about absolute value. You'll notice on your student pages, if you check up top, intro to absolute value. That's what we're working on today. For the time being, close your binder so that you're not tempted to write for a while. As always, when I teach you something new straight from me, I like you to think and concentrate and listen once through first. Then it'll be time to write. You'll notice in your stuff for the day, once we get to we do and vocab and stuff, you'll be ready to go. So for a while, close your binder, empty hands, all the things you would do to give me your full concentration if it were me rather than video me in front of you. And when you're ready to do that and think and learn and listen well, unpause and continue. Friday. So one of the questions that might be helpful today, I said 6 and -6 are opposite numbers. What does that mean? You've already learned that, right? Opposite numbers are the same distance from 0, but in opposite directions. So when we talk about negative and positive numbers, it's all about direction. Positive numbers are to the right, negative numbers are to the left. Or sometimes positive numbers are up, negative numbers are down. And really the only difference between, say, 6 and -6 or 3 and -3 is the direction you go. So sometimes we talk about the numbers, and sometimes we talk about the direction, and sometimes we only talk about the distance. So that's what we're going to get into today. What if I were to ask a question like this kind of? What if I just want to talk about the distance, but not worry about the direction in a situation like this? Dr. Noble lives in a main road, true story. Here's me. Chimney. The true story, the library is 1.5 miles one direction from my apartment. So if you think about me being like 0 on the number line, the library is more than 1 but less than 2 miles away. So it's like 1.5 miles that way. Guess that'd be the negative direction, right? And the bookstore, called Eagle Eye Books, great store, 1, 2, is 1.5 miles the other direction from my apartment. So if I want a book, bookstore, how far would I have to walk? Well, if you think about this situation, I have to walk 1.5 miles, whether or not I go to the library this way or to the bookstore this way. I have to walk 1.5 miles to get the book. You'll notice it would sound weird to say to go to the library, I would walk -1.5 miles. Whereas to walk to the bookstore, I'd walk +1.5 miles, even though that's kind of right. Like the direction matters, right? This is left, which means it's in the negative direction. This is right, which means it's in the positive direction. But sometimes we just want to talk about distance. It's weird to say it's -1.5 miles to the library. No, it's not. It's 1.5 miles to the library that way. And it's 1.5 miles to the bookstore that way. Sometimes we just want to talk about the number's distance and we don't want to talk about its direction. So that concept leads us into what I'm going to call absolute value today. And it works like this. So keeping that idea of my library in mind, we call a number's distance from 0 its absolute value. So let's start with my library, right? The bookstore was at 1.5 on the number line. Its distance from 0 is 1.5. Duh, right? It's 1.5 miles from my apartment or from 0 on the number line. Its absolute value, which is its distance from 0, we would say is 1.5. Now, the library was -1.5 miles in a certain way, right? It's left of my house, so it's in the negative direction. But again, sometimes we just want to talk about the distance and not talk about the direction. How far is the library from my house? It's 1.5 miles from my house. It's not -1.5 miles from my house. It's just in a different direction. So the absolute value of 1.5 is 1.5. The absolute value of -1.5 is also 1.5. It's a positive number That's how far it is from 0. Same with integers, right? 6, how far is it from 0 is its absolute value. So if you're looking at a number line, how far is 6 from 0? It is 6 units away. How far from 0 is -6? Well, it's also 6 units away. It's 6 units away in the other direction, but we don't say it's -6 units away from 0. We just say it's 6 units away from 0 if we're talking about its absolute value. Absolute value is about distance, not direction. Same here. 2 4/10. How far is it from 0? Well, it's 2 4/10. How about -2 4/10? How far is it from 0? It's also 2 4/10 units away. We don't say anything has a negative distance when we talk about distance. So what you'll notice, when we talk about numbers, direction is important. This number is to the right of 0. This number is to the left of 0. The direction is important for the number. This is 6 units to the right. This is 6 units to the left. This is 2 4/10 units to the right. This is 2 4/10 units to the left. When we talk about numbers, the direction matters. But when we talk about absolute value, which is distance, direction is not important. We just say 1.5 is that far from 0. We just say -1.5 is that far from 0. We say 6 is that far from 0. When we talk about absolute value, we don't talk about direction. When we talk about numbers, we do talk about direction, and that's the big difference in what they mean. So again, another example to help you think about that. We talked about if my apartment is at 0 on the number line, so to speak, where I live. The bookstore is 1.5 miles this way. The library is 1.5 miles this way. But either one, we would say, are 1.5 miles away. We wouldn't say that the library is -1.5 miles away. I also live in between two cities that are about 2 miles away. I live between a city called Decatur, which is about 2 miles in the same direction as the bookstore, and a city called Brookhaven, which is about 2 miles in the same direction as the library. Again, if we talk about that number, direction matters. I go a different direction. I go left to get to Brookhaven. I go right to get Decatur. If we talk about the numbers, the direction matters. If I just want to say how far is it to Decatur, it's 2 miles. If I want to say how far is it, distance, absolute value to Brookhaven, how far is it? It's 2 miles. So that's our big deal. I won't yell it at you because I know you have headphones on, and that would just be cruel. But that's a big idea for today. When we talk about distances, we always use positive numbers. The distance from 0 to 5 is 5 units. The distance from 0 to -5 is also 5 units. We always talk about distances as being positive. Think about it, to the right or to the left, that does matter for the number, but it doesn't matter for the distance. We wouldn't say the distance between 0 and -5 is -5 units. We just wouldn't say that. Okay. The symbol for absolute value is 2 bars around the number. So if I want to ask you what is the absolute value, what is the distance for this, you would write the number down normally, and you would write it between 2 sets of bars, kind of like that. If you see those big bars around it, that means what is the absolute value of that number, and it's that. Same thing here. If I want to ask you about the absolute value of -1.5, how far is it from 0? I put these big bars around it, and that lets you know I don't want to talk about the number. I want to talk about its absolute value or its distance, which is that. If I want to talk about how far is 6 from 0, I'll put it here. This means what's 6's absolute value? How far is it from 0? It's that. -6, again, that's its absolute value between those bars. How far is it from 0? It's that far. So these bar symbols around the outside of the number tell you that we're talking about its absolute value rather than its distance. So we're to do a bunch of examples like super fast. If you see the number in the bars, this means how far is 10 from 0? How many units from 0 is it? It's 10 units from 0. How far is -10 from 0? It's 10 units from 0. You'll notice when we talk about distance, it's always positive. How far is this from 0? Well, it's that far from 0. How far is this from 0 if it's negative? Well, it's the same distance, same absolute value, just in the opposite direction. How far is this from 0? Well, it's that far from 0. We always use positive numbers when we talk about absolute value. That's what I want you to take away from. Okay, open your student pages and let's get a few notes taken here. So we call a number's distance from 0 its absolute value, like that. You can pause as much as you need as I get over this. You'll probably want to do that. Make sure you're concentrating as you write and all that. So just as an example of what it might mean, student sits in the middle of my room. There's the student. One pencil sharpener is 12 feet to her left. So that would be like negative 12. One pencil sharpener is 12 feet to the right. That would be like positive 12. How far will she have to walk to sharpen her pencil? Now we're talking about distance, and distance is always positive. So if she goes this way, she has to walk 12 feet. If she walks this way, she still has to walk 12 feet. If we talk about distance, we always use positive numbers. Again, pause as much as you need to get these things written down and understood well. When we talk about numbers, find this one on your page. When we talk about numbers, direction is important. So we think about 12, that's to the right. Negative 12 is to the left. 6 2/10 is to the right. Negative 6 2/10 is to the left. When we talk about numbers, direction is important. When we talk about distance or absolute value, it's not. Direction is not important if we just want to talk about distance. How far is 12 from 0? It's 12 feet away to the pencil sharpener. How about negative 12? How far is it from 0? It's 12 units away. It's just in the other direction. How far is that from 0? 6 2/10. How far is that from 0? Negative 6 2/10. When we talk about distance or absolute value, the numbers are always positive. We don't say you're negative 12 feet from the pencil sharpener. Just don't talk that way, okay? So our big idea was this. When we talk about distances, we always use positive numbers. Always, 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 always. The distance from 0 to 5 is 5. The distance from 0 to negative 5 is also just 5 units. They're just to the left. Okay, we would not say that the distance between 0 and negative 5 is negative 5 units. You can't be negative 5 feet from something. All right. So the symbol for absolute value is 2 bars around the number. I do want you to be familiar with that. So if I want to talk about the distance of 12, I put 2 bars around it like that. If I want to talk about the distance to negative 12, I put 2 bars around it like that. If I want to talk about the absolute value of 6 2/10 rather than the number itself, I put the bars around it. If I want to talk about the absolute value of negative 6 2/10, I put the bars around it. That tells you that we're talking about distance, not direction. Okay, so speed examples here. These are always positive. How far are they away from 0? Well, negative 4 is how far from 0? It's 4 to the left. How about 4? Well, it's also 4 to the right. 14 7/200, how far is it from 0? That far. How about negative 14 7/200? Same distance, but we're talking about distance, so the number is positive. Doesn't matter if the number is a mixed number. Doesn't matter if it's a scary looking bigger number. Oops, almost made it wrong. It's always a positive number because it's always a certain positive distance from 0. All right, I am just about out of time. So hopefully this is making good sense to you too. Last thing to do is check your understanding questions. They are here in your pages and here in your pages. And of course, your answers are after that. Hope this made lots of sense to you. If not, go back and watch it again. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day.